So we haven't had a spoiler season for quite a while, and I don't think we actually have one starting now, but we have some spoilers, even though we actually had some spoilers for Dominaria United last week with a quick preview, when I believe that spoiler season's going to be in August, I believe mid-August, August 18th or something around then. But now we've got some Unfinity spoilers for some reason. I mean, I'm not complaining, but yeah, if anyone knows the exact Unfinity spoiler season schedule, please let me know in the comments below. I believe the set comes out in October. Regardless, yeah, spoilers today. Why not? And this is a really exciting spoiler because, my goodness, this is a legal commander. I mean, not the image you're seeing right now, but let's jump into the commander and talk about why this is an exciting commander. So on this episode, we're talking about Magar of the Magic Strings. That's right, a Unfinity commander that is legal in Commander, and I believe other Eternal formats as well. Now, previously, unsets had been printed in silver border, which made it so that those cards essentially are not legal in any format except for, like Unfinity formats, or unformats, I should say. But now, unless the card has an acorn symbol at the bottom where, that little foily part is, or hollow snip, or whatever you call that little, oval at the bottom, unless there's an acorn there, the card is actually legal in Eternal formats. And yes, and I'll actually probably discuss this on another episode, but that's gonna get really confusing for a lot of players out there. So just be prepared to explain to someone, yes, this card is legal, but yes, this card is not. Even though they are both from the same set, and technically they're not really actually, banned or anything like that. It's just more so like, no, we can't utilize acorn cards. So yeah, it's gonna get confusing. Regardless, this commander is legal, so let's talk about what it does. It's a 3/3 Minotaur Performer, and this might be the very first Performer creature type, but regardless, it costs 1 black and a red, and it has pay 1 black red, note the name of target instant sorcery card in your graveyard and put it onto the battlefield face down. It's a 3/3 creature with, whenever this creature is combined to a player, you may create a copy of the card with the noted name. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost, and if this creature would leave the battlefield, exile instead of putting it anywhere else. So that is an incredibly powerful ability. I mean, it's kind of like Manifest in a way, but instead of getting cards off the top of your library and turning them down as, face down creatures, now instead you are getting cards from your graveyard, and when you are getting, I mean, they have to be instant sorceries, but when you are getting them and when they get through in combat on a player, the result is essentially, cool, we get a copy of that spell for free. So no matter how big that spell is, we get a free copy of it, and of course there are ways that we can easily use and abuse this, and some pretty disgusting things that we can do with this. So yeah, this is a really unique commander, the likes of which we really have never seen before, and yeah, that is an incredibly powerful effect. So I could definitely see, as long as the reception for Unfinity overall, in the community is good, I could definitely see this commander being a pretty popular one. And one that, again, can be pretty powerful and can do some really gross things, and you gotta be careful when building it with this one because, well, some of those gross things are kind of, let's just say, taboo in Commander. We'll talk about some of those cards that are incredibly effective, but might irritate your playgroup just a little bit. And a quick note, every single card that I'm talking about on this episode is in a card list link in the description below, so if you're interested in building around this commander, well, you might want to consider picking up these cards sooner rather than later, because when new commanders are spoiled, including ones that are spoiled way in advance, sometimes cards that work very well with that commander might go up in price. So make sure you check that link out in the description. And now with that said, let's jump into it. So first up, well, you do need to get cards actually into your graveyard so that you can actually utilize your commander's ability. And of course, yes, I mean, casting instant sorceries is definitely a way to do that. But of course, in these colors, you also have some other, more efficient ways to actually get some massive spells into your graveyard with cards like Faithless Looting, Reforge of Soul, and Wheel of Fate. Faithless Looting says draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, and it's got a flashback cost of 2 and a red, so you can do that again. So again, instead of just trying to cast a massive instant sorcery to then get value out of it again and again and again with your commander's ability, well, instead let's just, cast a much smaller spell, one that you can even cast on turn 1 to draw some cards and ditch those massive spells which you really don't want to hard cast into your graveyard. And of course, there are plenty of other, fantastic looting and rummaging effects, but obviously in these colors as well, you've got great wheel effects as well, like Reforge the Soul. It says each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards, and it's got a miracle cost of 1 and a red. So if you get lucky, yeah, you can cast this one for just 2 mana. Speaking of which, there's Wheel of Fate, which you cannot cast. Well, okay, technically we'll talk about this here in a bit, but regardless, suspend 4 for 1 and a red. So you are actually going to suspend this and just wait, and then eventually you get to wheel. Each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. It's a great way to ditch a ton of cards in your hand, get them into your graveyard to be set up for your commander, and then to refill your hand to keep you going. Now, this one I specifically want to bring up because, again, it does not have a mana cost, so you cannot cast it. That being said, if you are able to get this into your graveyard, your commander can help you with that. Because, again, by making it into that 3/3 face-down creature and having it deal combat damage to a player, you get a copy of this card, and you can cast it without paying its mana cost. So, it does not matter that this does not have a mana cost. You can cast it without paying whatever non-mana cost it did not have, which makes perfect sense, right? Yeah, Magic's a funny game, regardless. Also in Rakdos, you've got some fantastic effects to get the exact cards that you want into your graveyard with cards like Entomb, Final Parting, and, okay, well, maybe not the exact cards, but a ton of cards with Morality Shift. Entomb is an instant for a black, and, yeah, okay, I will mention this card is pretty expensive. Regardless, there are other effects, and yeah, we'll talk about Final Parting here in a second. Regardless, Entomb says search your library for a card, put that card in your graveyard, then shuffle your library. So this one can set you up for the perfect card that can help you out, and it can set you up right away. If you want to be able to cheat out a massive instant sorcery thanks to your commander, this is a great way to do it. Next up, Final Parting is a much more budget-friendly card. It says search your library for 2 cards, put one in your hand, the other in your graveyard, then shuffle your library. So again, we go get that massive instant sorcery that we really want into our graveyard, and we get something that we can actually utilize into our hand. Regardless, we can utilize a ton of things with Morality Shift, which is a sorcery that says, exchange your graveyard in library, then shuffle your library. Now, yes, you do have to be careful with this, but this can be a massive play, just getting essentially your entire library into your graveyard, and then you essentially have full access to whatever you want thanks to your commander. Or again, I should say, okay, utilize your commander to make them into a creature, to then hit opponents, and then, yeah, then you get them for free. You know what I mean? But of course, this isn't the only big spell that we have in this deck. For example, we can also utilize some fantastic cards like Brass's Bounty and Worse Fears. Brass's Bounty says for each land you control, create a treasure token. This is just basically a massive ritual effect that, well, it's kind of like a ritual that has more staying power. We get those treasures, which we can then utilize whenever we need to. And just being able to generate a ton of free mana whenever we hit an opponent with, that, creature card or whatever we want to call the thing is huge. Because, yeah, maybe we can utilize that mana to get even more of those instant sorceries out of our graveyard as creatures. Now, while Brass's Bounty can help us with mana, Worse Fears can help us, well, with a lot of things. It says, you control target player during that player's next turn, exile Worse Fears. Now, normally you'd just be casting this once, but again, with this commander, exiling that copy that you make of the card does not matter. So this can be an especially effective and really brutal card with this commander. Essentially, you can just keep mind-slavering a player again and again and again. And you're going to be able to get through on that player, obviously, at least after the first time, because you can just, while you have their turn, say, well, with these creatures that I have, I'm just going to swing out at someone else, and now I can't block. And of course, in a one-on-one scenario, this is basically a lock, and yeah, that player's not going to be able to do anything because you can just, again, you swing out with their creatures, you also can just tap down all their lands so they have no mana to utilize on your turn, so they can't really do anything at instant speed then, and you just can keep mind-slavering them again and again and again. So yeah, this card is incredibly effective, and yes, very brutal with this commander. Speaking of effective though, how about a card like Army of the Damned, which says create 13 tap 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So, by getting one of your creatures through, one of your little 3/3s that just happens to be a giant instant sorcery, you are getting a massive army every single time that you hit a player. So you can definitely build your board up really quickly with something like this. And you can demolish boards really quickly with a card like In Garrick's Wake, which says draw all creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control. It's going to be very hard for your opponents to ever rebuild or ever, try to block you and stop you from what you're doing when you can just keep casting this by getting through on one player. And of course, after restoring your opponent's creatures, you can also utilize those creatures with a card like Rise of the Dark Realms, which says put all creature cards from all graveyards on the battlefield under your control. And of course, there are other one-sided board wipes that you can utilize like in Garrick's Wake, so yeah, in combination, that can be an incredibly deadly thing. And speaking of deadly, well, I do want to mention that there are cards out there that are, well, let's just say no-nos for most games of Commander. They are quite taboo with cards like Obliterate and Decree of Annihilation, which basically just get rid of, well, everything, including lands. Obliterate can't be countered, and it says destroy all artifacts, creatures, and lands. They can't be regenerated. And then Decree of Annihilation is going to exile all artifacts, creatures, lands, graveyards, and hands from the game. This is the type of commander that can find ways to utilize these kinds of cards in a one-sided way. I mean, a card like Obliterate, you can just essentially say, okay, if I can make that face-down creature that is essentially, connected to Obliterate or whatever you want to call it, if I can make that indestructible with something like an indestructible counter, for something like a Daring Fiend Bonder, great. Then I can just keep swinging with that and just destroying boards and swinging with that and destroying boards over and over and over again. And yeah, mass land destruction isn't exactly something that the vast majority of Commander players out there are okay with. So if you want to utilize this kind of a strategy, make sure you ask your playgroup first. And also up there, keep in mind there also might be some playgroups that aren't okay with a card like Worst Fears that can lock players out, or, a card like Savage Beating, which can essentially combo this commander to just give you infinite combats. Savage Beating can only be played during your turn and only during combat, and it says choose one creature you control, gain double strike until end of turn, or untap all creatures you control, and after this phase, the initial combat phase. So yeah, obviously you just basically want the second part of that, and you just keep getting additional combats again and again and again, because you get to keep casting this every single time your little 3/3 hits. So yeah, this is basically infinite combats once you get it going. Or at least I should say, as long as you can get that creature through again and again and again. And of course, there are plenty of ways to do that. I mean, just think about being able to cast a card like Disrupt Decorum again and again and again. It says go to all creatures you don't control. Which again basically means until your next turn, those creatures attack each combat a Fable and attack a player other than you a Fable. So by getting this into your graveyard and then making a creature out of it, cool, now we can just keep goading our opponent's creatures as long as we can keep getting ours through, which again makes it really hard for opponents to ever block that creature. And yeah, on top of that, our opponent's going to be doing our dirty work for us and attacking each other again and again and again, which leaves them wide open for our attacks. But of course, we've got plenty of other ways to get our creatures through to ensure that we get to cast those spells for free with cards like Rogue's Passage, War Cadence, and Bedlam, just to name a few. Rogue's Passage is a land that can either tap or color, so we can pay 4 to tap and take target creature not be able to be blocked this turn. And again, sometimes it just takes one massive spell, one of our 3/3s getting through to be able to cast something huge that we can take over the game with. And then War Cadence has pay X in a red. This turn, creatures can't block unless the controller pays X for each blocking creature they control. Generally, we're going to be able to utilize this to get the vast majority of our creatures through, especially if one of our opponents doesn't have enough mana to even pay for one of them. Or we can just really throw the entire board into chaos by playing a card like Bedlam, which says creatures can't block. So this essentially guarantees that all of our creatures are going to be able to get through, and now we get all those spells for free. Yeah, there are some really gross things you can do with this commander. Speaking of gross, how about doubling up on our triggers with cards like Berserker's Onslaught and Rage Reflection? Berserker's Onslaught says, attacking creatures you control have double strike, and Rage Reflection, well, it doesn't really specify attacking, so all of our creatures just have double strike all the time. But again, the important part is essentially, hey, if our creatures hit an opponent, they are hitting them then a second time. So again, we get their trigger then twice to be able to cast whatever, insert sorcery that they actually are twice. So of course, that's an incredible amount of value, and in many cases, game-ending value. I mean, just think about getting Army of the Damned twice, or, oh gosh, Worst Fears twice, being able to take control of 2 opponents' turns. Yeah, there's really no coming back from that. And yeah, there are plenty of ways to give creatures double strike, especially with all the red cards that we have access to. Now, speaking of red, another card that we do have access to is Double Vision, which says whenever you cast your first insert sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell and choose targets for the copy. Now, correct me below in the comments if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that this one still works in combination with our commander, essentially, because we are still copying the spell and then casting it. So we still are casting the actual spell. So as long as we haven't cast any other instant or sorcery in that turn, if we hit an opponent with one of our 3/3s and we cast that spell, copy, then cast, you know what I mean, then we would get an additional copy thanks to this. But again, I could be wrong, so please correct me below in the comments if I'm wrong on that. One that I am pretty sure of, but not positive though, is Twinning Staff. I don't think this one actually works with this commander, but please, again, correct me below in the comments if I'm wrong on that. That being said, I still want to bring it up just in case. If you would copy a spell one or more times and said copy it that many times plus initial time, you may choose new targets for the copy. Now again, with that combat damage trigger, we are creating a copy of the spell. But again, we still have to actually, cast it. We are, having not had to pay any mana to cast it, but we still have to cast it. So I don't think it works with Twinning Staff. But again, please let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on this. Nevertheless, another card I really want to bring up, though, is Heartstone, which says, well, it's an old card, so I'll read Circle Tax. Activate abilities of creatures cost 1 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana, and that costs to less than 1 mana. Again, our commander's ability does cost 1 black-red, so 3 mana in total. We can reduce, this by 1 essentially now to just cost black-red, so 2 mana in total, and that is a ton of savings throughout the game. So a card like this can really help us out. And of course, with this commander being a fantastic mana sink, we really want a lot of mana generation in this deck, a ton of ramp. So yeah, a fantastic mana rock like Gilded Lotus can really help us out. A 5 mana rock that has tap at 3 mana of any one color. And yeah, there are plenty of other mana rocks out there that are incredibly efficient that can really help out with a deck like this. And also, again, with ramping, if there are instants and sorceries that we do need to hard cast from our hand that might have a high converted mana cost, of course, by ramping, that can really help us get to those as well. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think a lot of players out there are going to be really excited about this new commander, Magar of the Magic Strings. It is an incredibly unique commander that has a lot of powerful applications and some incredibly brutal applications as well. That being said, it's going to be interesting to see what players think of these new Unfinity commanders, and again, what players think about, well, Unfinity cards in general coming into the format. Well, only some of them, though, because again, those ones with the acorn will not be legal, so it's kind of a strange set, again, with, probably about half the cards or so being legal and half not being. Regardless, if you are interested in this commander, make sure you check out that link in the description below, the cards that I talked about on this episode. And with all that said, though, make sure you stay tuned to this channel for even more exciting quick takes, spoilers, deck techs, everything else. Anyways, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.